Hello, everyone. I'm James Milan. Welcome to this DPCD update. And DPCD, of course, is the Department of Planning and Community Development here in town. Who better to get an update from than the director of that department, Jennifer Raitt. Jennifer, thanks for being here.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
We always appreciate it. We're I understand that something we talked about in our last update has since happened. Just last night, I'm talking to you on a Tuesday, and last night on December 14th, you had a Connect Arlington public forum to discuss the plans around transportation, and particularly, I think, to hear from some consultants. And so, how did that go?
I think the forum went very well. We had about 35 people participating, and it was a number of people from throughout, representative of people from throughout the community. And it was, as you said, primarily hearing from the consultant, Nelson Nygaard, who were presenting the results from the existing conditions survey that they did, a sort of inventory of all of the existing transportation issues and challenges in Arlington. And then they also spent really the majority of the time was spent on reviewing sort of the high level strategies that relate to creating community connections, increasing safety, the pedestrian network, transit concerns, biking, and sort of community patterns in the future related to transportation. Just as an example, as we also talked about sustainability goals, we talked about transportation funding, and sort of these were like big buckets of strategies that the consultant walked us through, and then paused at different times for both polling through Zoom, where little screen pops up, and instead of having a sticky dot, you get a vote
Mhm.
in in Zoom world. And that proved, to be very interesting, and just again illuminating of sort of who's in the room and what the sort of immediate thoughts are about priorities. And I thought that was very interesting actually to see what people's priorities were. Can share a little bit about that.
Were you
And then they also,
surprised?
feel what's that?
If I might interject, were you
Yeah.
surprised by any of what kind of came out through that kind of immediate tapping into the pulse there?
No, no, nothing was really surprising to me as much as it was just interesting to see, where people's interests are right now. And I think that, we're building a long range transportation plan, so that means that it's supposed to be for 20 years. And I think that polling often is priorities are more about current times. So people are responding to things that they're seeing as issues right now that they want the town to address. And that was my takeaway about some of the priorities. But I also think that people want the town to be thinking big picture about, for example, the biking network. That came up quite a bit. Things like bike boulevards, prioritization of creating like a continuous network for biking, and these are things that we're also actually talking about through our net zero planning. So I found a little bit of overlap there, and that's clearly a long range priority, not something that would happen immediately, but it's certainly steps that the town can take to get there. So that was what I observed. I also observed a lot of talk about the sort of the pedestrian experience, and uh, issues that need to be addressed in relationship to the pedestrian experience. And also that once we improve that pedestrian experience, it actually could have an impact on traffic, and issues around driving in the
Hmm.
community. So, for example, increasing sidewalk widths, increasing areas for tree plantings, sort of creating these more of a boulevard feel. I mentioned that before, but I think that there's some real desire for that in the community. At least, again, in the forum, that was what was expressed. But also, the survey results indicated a lot of these things as well. The surveys that
Hmm.
we've taken so far through this planning process.
And I understand the survey around Connect Arlington is going to be extended for if people want to take it, they have more opportunity to do so.
Yes, that's right. The survey is open until next week.
Okay.
Yes, so
Yeah, one thing that seems pretty clear, having lived in this town as I have for 25 years now, um, everything that you do to enhance the pedestrian or biker's experience, and I'm speaking as somebody who commuted to work in Boston by bike for 20 plus years. Um, Everything you do there is going to have an impact on the driving experience, and people have to be willing, I think, to accept the ramifications for driving, which I think will be incrementally more difficult, if you want to put it that way, as we again enhance the experience of the other constituencies who have a right to that space. And again, as you've said, that's the community we want to be. It certainly feels like there's broad consensus around that. Hopefully people will be willing to deal uh, with what they need to in order to make that happen.
yes, and that's a lot of what this next month or so will be about, is sort of uh, getting into more of the details of the strategies and thinking about the prioritization of those strategies. And part of prioritizing is also thinking about some trade-offs, because if everything is a priority, really nothing is a priority. So as you know, so I think that's something that we'll have to grapple with for sure as we begin to finalize the plan.
One of the things I think that Arlington does best is kind of lay its cards. The town lays its cards out on the table for people as best you guys can. And I appreciate the fact that this seems like another example of that.
Yes, well, yeah, and it's about policies, it's also about finance. And I think that to create some sort of potentially local transportation improvement program where we're clear about aligning our policies with funding, and whether it's through Chapter 90 funds or capital funds, other funding sources that we bring into town, they should align with our policies and our goals.
So we will leave it at
We'll
that so
come
as
we'll come
not to
back to that
extend
another
the
time.
conversation, yep, too much further today. And we do have a couple of other things to talk about. One, I know, and they both relate to community development block grants or CDBGs. Um, and in one, I think it's kind of good news for people in that the news on the national stage is how desperately we need some more uh, action from Congress as a nation, because the CARES Act seems like ancient history to people living through this. How nice that, in fact, there is some CARES Act money still to be distributed here in Arlington. So tell us about that.
Sure. Yes, we learned that we received about $330,000 through the Community Development Block Grant CARES Act, which is sort of a special set aside for this particular federal program. And as an entitlement community, we received the funding directly through HUD. The funds that we are allocating are the majority of them, about $200,000, are going to go towards a business resiliency program. And the application is actually open as of today, and it's open through January 15th. All of the materials are already on the town's website, active now. And the goal here is to provide up to $10,000 to small businesses that have a brick and mortar location and employ 20 people or less. And they can choose one or two pathways for assistance or both. The first one is, of course, a working capital grant, which could be used to provide funding for offsetting payroll costs, rent or mortgage payments, utility payments, loss of inventory that's due to COVID closures, or they could have just technical assistance. We are going to be issuing a request for proposals from consultants who will be providing that technical assistance, or they can choose both. And the technical assistance could be anything from IT support. We think potentially like need for help in understanding direct marketing. We have a couple of other suggested technical assistance ideas, and people will apply for those funds and also receive technical assistance, or one or the other. So it's a wide range of options. The other thing that's required because it's community development block grant money is that the entity must create or retain a job, a funded position that's held by an employee who makes a low or moderate income. CDBG is all about being income eligible, and so different activities mean different things in terms of eligibility. In this case, they have to employ a person either creating a new job or retaining somebody who's low or moderate income.
And I would certainly think that what you've just described is the requirement. So what you were just saying about
Yes,
needing to retain or acquire an employee in of that status,
right.
it being a brick and mortar thing with 20 or fewer employees, boy, there are a lot of local businesses in town that are going to meet those requirements, it seems like.
Yes, yes, we think that there will be a great demand, and especially with the announcement from yesterday with regard to some rollbacks that are going to be starting tomorrow. We have a sense that there will be even higher demand, particularly along the lines of loss of inventory and other potential losses as a result of the pandemic.
Right, and of course, the rollbacks you're referring to are, coming from the state or Arlington and other communities in the area, and basically are going to be restricting the ability for businesses to conduct themselves in the way that they normally would.
Right,
Um,
for a temporary time.
yeah,
Yes,
for a while, and for obviously the most compelling of reasons. Um,
yes.
you alluded to the fact that the CDBG application period for, 21, 22 is coming up here. Is that right?
Yes,
Um,
so our regular CDBG round, which is sort of something that's open every year, usually in December, and runs through January. We accept applications for our regular program, which includes everything from affordable housing, economic development, streets and sidewalk programs, parks and recreation, social service programs, sort of all of those options. Anybody can apply for funding, and all of that, the application as well as an FAQ, frequently asked questions sheet, is also available on the website.
and I just want to make sure I have this right. So both the 300 plus $1,000 coming from the CARES Act that is to be distributed soon, let's
Mhm.
say, um, the applications for that and the applications in general for the usual round of CDBG funding, both of those are open until mid-January, you said?
Yes,
Okay. So,
but the decisions happen at different times.
mhm,
So the CARES Act money is an immediate resource, meaning that once we make the decision and we provide notice to the businesses that they've received funding, the funding will become available right then and there. In
mhm.
our regular round, what happens is it goes through a longer review process with our CDBG subcommittee of the select board, and goes through a series of sort of recommendations to the select board and then to town meeting, where it's endorsed by town meeting, and then the funding becomes available after in the next fiscal year. So it's operating on a slightly different timeline.
Mhm. One last question. Regarding you were saying that the way that the CARES Act funds will be distributed are up to $10,000 for local businesses that meet those requirements and make the
Mhm.
application. Um, and that is open until, I think you said, January 15th. Um,
Yes.
and So my question is that a first come, first serve kind of thing, or do you leave till all the applications are in and then kind of go through them after the deadline has passed?
They'll be accepted on a rolling basis, and we'll be aiming to make decisions on an ongoing basis, but we'll likely be notifying all applicants by the middle of January. So that is our timeline.
But
And
it does
given
sound like
given the
there is.
timing of the release, and then also just the review process, making sure that we have all the right materials in order to make a sufficient review and also to make equitable decisions that are aligned with both the program and across various business needs. That timing will provide us with the time in order to make that kind of decision.
Great, but if you are accepting these applications on a rolling basis, then there is some incentive for folks to get the application in as soon as they practicably can.
Ideally, yes, but there's not a disadvantage to submitting it in January either. It will enable us to make sure that we have all the application materials that we need to conduct a review.
Great. All right. Well, this is really, fairly heartening news in the midst of
Yeah,
such
it
darkness that
is.
we are living in.
It's nice when the federal government pulls through, and we hope that they will in the future as well, for
Yes.
potentially, additional funds through CARES, or some other resource in the future, because we really do need the additional aid, and we will probably need even more than we have right now.
Yeah. And speaking to our state legislators recently, it is clearer than ever just how urgent the need is on the state level for the federal government to come through. So, as we have often said in the past, fingers crossed. Obviously, changes are afoot. Yesterday, the Electoral College did make things official. So, again, one hopes that under a new administration, things are going to, work better this way.
Yes,
Let us hope.
perhaps we can discuss that in a future session.
That would be, yeah. I look forward to it, especially if it's, again, feels like good news at the time. That would be great. All right. Well, anything else that we haven't covered?
No, I think that covers all of the items for today. Thank you so
Great.
much.
Thank you very much. I have been
Welcome.
speaking to Jennifer Raitt, the director of our Department of Planning and Community Development, for this DPCD update. I'm James Milan. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.